It looks like bad guying is multiplying. Here's a look at the new NECA toys. Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder clones. Based on the original Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books from Mirage Studios, Shredder is back, sort of. The Foot have conducted cloning experiments to bring their leader back from the grave. As they work out the bugs, more specifically the space worms, to protect the cloning process, the Turtles must battle these twisted monstrosities. These 7-inch scale figures, four-arm Shredders approximately 7 inches and mini Shredders 2.8 inches tall, includes extra hands and space worm attachments to create battle-damaged forearm. Comes in a special comic book-themed window box packaging with new illustration by Kevin Eastman. While the Foot are doing science experiments with space worms, I'd like to thank the folks first over at NECA Toys before, of course, we get down to the details of both the figures of the larger four-arm Shredder and mini Shredder. But yeah, I'd like to thank the folks over at NECA Toys that did make this review possible by providing the samples that we're about to have a look at. I'm going to now grab the tape measure, and in process, we're going to measure first four-arm Shredder, who in this case is about 6 3/4 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 17 centimeters tall. We're going to have to reduce that, of course, by quite a lot in order to measure off Mini Shredder. Mini Shredder is only 3 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 7 centimeters tall. We have the person behind the camera and you, the person in front of the monitor, looked at a Shredder similar to this before. I'm going to bring him in right now. This was the Shredder that had sort of those lobster claw hands. Height-wise, he's a little bit shorter than four-arm Shredder, but it keeps the consistent color scheme of the other two Shredders that we're about to have a look at in this review, and these are going to look rather nicely on my shelf. For comparisons, of course, of the Turtles, we got to get underway with those. Here's what it looks like with the original Mirage NECA Turtle. I don't know, this is Leonardo, because of course he does have the sheets on the back of his body. Then, speaking of Leonardo, here's also what it looks like with the new recently looked at Mirage Turtles. I also wanted to bring in this one as well. A couple of corrections I did want to make, because a couple of you guys were asking in the comments section down below. It wasn't necessarily Lawson's design, as Eastman had perfected this design of the Turtles prior to that. But when it always comes time to looking at these Turtles, at least this design of Turtles, I always tend to think of Lawson first. One other thing I also did want to mention, as some of you did comment down below in the comments section, how you could tell the Turtles apart. You can, in fact, pop the heads off all of these. And located inside, and the reason I did actually bring this one in, is if you look at the inside of it, it actually says R. And that'll tell you right away who the character is, Raphael. Leonardo, just to show you that I'm not making this all up, you pop the head of Leonardo and look on the inside of it, and it will, in fact, have an L. See right there. So yeah, there is a way technically to tell the difference between not necessarily Leonardo and Donatello. That problem was easily solved. But at least to tell the difference between Michelangelo and Raphael, you don't check necessarily under the hood, you check underneath the head, popping, of course, the head off the neck ball joint. With the confusion now cleared, let's move over to the accessory end of things. Now, unfortunately, the things that come included with this 2-pack are only really for the larger of the Shredders. Mini Shredder comes included with squats. But still, let's look at the things that come included with four-arm Shredder. First of all, if you prefer karate chopping hands, ka-chow, you do have these ones available at your disposal. Single blades on the end of both of these, panel lined really nicely, and overall well colored too. Now these hands obviously can be swapped out. Thumbsies will still apply. The rule of thumbs will always still apply whether you have 2 arms or you have 4. Just pop off, of course, the provider. Why does this look like I'm milking a cow? Pop off, needless to say, either hands of whatever side you want to start with, and then replace those out accordingly. Even though the figure doesn't have anything to really necessarily hold, we sure have enough accessories, I suppose, with other box sets from NECA Toys. You could easily just pillage from something from there. This one does have unfortunately a bent blade. I don't know why it came out like this. Maybe it's supposed to look like this. But judging by the fact that this one looked fine, I'm guessing that this one unfortunately got a little bit bent when I was removing it from the packaging. Or it may have even started that way. Or it could be possibly the case where it's supposed to look like this as well. Either way, you get yourself gripping hands. They don't grip really much of anything other than the fact, well, I guess you could, again, use weapons, wielding those from other box sets we've looked at before. This is kind of interesting. I really like the look of these. You get yourself these, and while looking at them, you may think to yourself, tiny little 70s shag carpets. No, but I liked where you were going with that. These are actually just end trails of space worms. Of course, the turtles had to contend with these clones of shredders that were made up of space worms. And these are actually serve a purpose other than just looking at them right now. It kind of looks like some old toilet seats. I had a friend, this is like 5 or 6 years ago, I went into their parents' house and, of course, went to use the washroom. And I noticed they still had this, not only as a rug in front of the toilet, but also on the top of the toilet as well. I don't know. I would have thought that this would have been outdated a long time ago. Have you ever gone to the washroom and seen these still circulating around the toilets? Why are we talking about this anyways? Let's move that aside. What you can do, though, is you can take yourself 4-arm shredder, taking any one of the provided 4 arms and simply just yank them off. It may be a little jarring the first time you do this. Every single time, in fact, when you go to bend the elbows, these are usually prone to popping off. And of course, from there, you can always just replace the hands accordingly. But if you look to the end of it, you take one end of the shag carpet and you just plug it into the bottom of it. And what this does, very effectively, I would say, is it looks like the arm has been cut off and then the space worms are sort of trickling their way out the end of whatever's left of the arm. You could kind of just have it resting on a tabletop like that. Of course, this then does play a purpose. Now that we have ourselves a severed stump on the end of Shredder's arm, simply just, and I do like the way that they've actually matched the colors. So like the coloring of the brown matches the color quite nicely of the forearm. Pop that in place, and now it looks like Shredder's gotten himself a lost arm. That's really cool. I might even just decide to display it like that. I mean, I have 3 arms still good on Shredder. That's good enough for me. And I'll just have one displayed then just next to it, just neighboring next to it. That's really, really cool, though. But let's go ahead for right now and remove these. We'll put those to the side. This would be the smallest one I'd be the most worried about losing. And then we'll just pop back in the forearm and get a closer look at the larger Shredder. Now, again, we've already looked at this sort of Shredder before. The masks are obviously very different from one another. This one has a more elongated faceplate. This one has kind of more of a boxier looking head sculpt, but the colors do match quite nicely. Between the gap of time between this one and this one, they've done well to match the colors of sort of that bluish silver. It carries over also to its shoulder blades, shoulder spikes, and the front tunic as well as sash belt seems to have matching reds. So I think they've done a pretty good job at that. One thing, though, unfortunately, with my 4-arm Shredder, and I would imagine it's mileage by mold, is if you look at the eye on this one, it sort of is slightly off-angled. I don't know if it's supposed to look like that. Of course, some of the cruder-looking comics back in the day of Team NT may have actually drawn Shredder looking like this, but it does look like one eye is slightly on an off angle. I'm sure it probably is supposed to look like that. But the coloring is really good on this one. Of course, you got the panel lining making up the majority of all the details on this. Looks to be the case that they probably have molded the arms in the brown plastic, possibly even molded the tunic in this color of red, and then just gone back to it with a little panel lining pen and just drawn in all the details from there. It's a nice looking Shredder, though. Even though it does have 4 arms, it's a little bit more limited, as you could probably imagine, when it comes to the shoulder areas. Of course, we'll talk more about that in a moment. This lower skirting here of his tunic is a softer plastic, and this bottom section here is also more of a softer plastic too. The lower end of his feet do match, again, the colors of the other one that we looked at before, although this one had kind of more larger, kind of looks like some decorative piece you would see on a tabletop at Thanksgiving, maybe holding fruit inside. This one has obviously a much smaller foot. It still has peg hold space provided on the bottoms of his feet. So again, if you want to use yourself a display stand, even though one is not included, easily just pull one from your tickle trunk of display stands. I have myself a very similar tickle trunk. For the articulation on 4-arm Shredder, his head is on a decent ball joint. You can rotate the head all the way around. It's a little loud and squeaky while you're doing this. You can move the head down, you can have to move head up, and you can also rock that back and forth as well. The top arm does move fairly well. I mean, obviously the shoulder pads are going to get in the way of things. They're not even the softest of plastics either, kind of more of a harder plastic. You can move the arm back and forth, but as already mentioned, every time you do move it, you tend to pop the forearm off. At least I've noticed it. You can bring both the arms out. Again, there's a hinge. Actually, the hinge joint works, I find, better on the arm that's below than the one that's above it. The figure does have a bicep swivel, and that's the case in both. The arms do hinge in two same places, double hinges, but again, like every time I'm doing this, I always tend to pop the arms off. Hands also rotate all the way around, I should say, by also the fact that these do pop off. There's technically articulation where you can swivel these back and forth too. Hinging back and forth are also the hands. The upper torso doesn't seem to have, it has a waist swivel, but I've tried to kind of get something going when it comes to a ball joint. Maybe there is a ball joint, as it seems like there's a little bit of give back and forth, but it rotates more side to side than anything else. Legs do split out, no hindrance whatsoever there. You can kind of see, again, the ball joints working behind the scenes there. You can take the legs and move them forward. Yes, you can move them back. Sure. You can also swivel the top of the thigh. Double hinge on the knee. There is no articulation that I can see, at least on the boot, but at least you can move the feet back and forth this way, and you can also ankle rock them too. Nice looking shredder. Putting that one to the side and getting a look at his mini yourself. Mini yourself? Putting him right there, of course. Let's look at smaller sized shredder. This was actually one I was surprised to see didn't come included with the display stand, because while looking at this in its clear plastic prison, I just assumed that the figure was going to have a difficult time to stand. And while he does have, to be fair, still a tough time to stand, he stands a lot better than I was expecting him to be. You kind of just sort of, well, see, now I'm failing miserably at doing this, but you just put him down and he seems to stand somewhat okay. I'm debunking myself by even saying that. Despite his small-sized footprint, yeah, if you can get him on there resting, he seems to stand, there you go, fine. See, now it wasn't a fibber face. If you lean him forward, he seems to balance the best. I still would have done one better and still included pegholes in the undersides of his feet, simply just so you could use yourself a display stand, pop that on the bottom of it, and then the figure would be going nowhere. The detailing on the figure is just a smaller version of the larger one, obviously just missing the fact it doesn't have two extra arms to work with. It still has only just single blades, which are more of a softer plastic. Detail for the face is similar to the larger one, just on a smaller scale. The head is obviously a little bit less boxy. It gets a little bit more tapered off down below here, and it still has the red eyes with some really rich looking panel lining added in there as well. Longer spikes, I've got one spike here. This spike, just by the nature of turning his head back and forth, you'll find yourself probably sometimes clipping the top of this. I may even just want to heat this a little bit because I've got one little spike, one little lone spike here that's a little bit bent out of place. But yeah, it's a nicely detailed looking shredder for, again, its size. I just still wish that the figure could have come included with pegholes, at least on the bottom. Maybe a display stand, something similar to what we could have gotten, say, with Dream Warrior's marionette Freddy. That little tiny puppet had a little tiny bloodied stand. I think they probably could have done something similar here for smaller sized shredder. Articulation on this guy, his head still is on that ball joint. Sure, yeah, you can rotate the arm back and forth. The only limitations when it comes to this figure is he doesn't seem to have swivels in his forearms. You really have to commit the whole task of having the forearm attached to the arm. Everything sort of has to go together. It's like one band. You never really want to split them up. The arms do hinge out only by just a little bit. And again, you can move them back and forth. I thought, for example, like the figure could have had hand articulation, but that's not the case. The hand is attached to the arm is attached to the shoulder is attached to, again, a smaller size shredder. The waist does swivel back and forth. Again, it doesn't look like it seems to be on a ball joint, so this is as much as you're going to be able to get from this. It's like I'm almost about to peel a tiny little shrimp. I guess that would be the size of a jumbo shrimp, or a tiger shrimp. The legs do hinge back and forth. They seem to be on ball joints. And there seems to be also a swivel back and forth for the ankle. You can also move it up and down as well. Small size shredder obviously doesn't come included with any accessories. I guess for his size and stature, it'd be probably quite hard to get anything going when it comes to accessories for him. But larger size shredder, sure, yeah, comes included with little severed stump entrails that have the space worms all trickling out. Probably not the sound that space worms would make. And one last time, just to bring him in, here's what the other shredder that we had looked at earlier here on this channel. Hey, I didn't know you reviewed that. I did. Go check out that video. And of course, here's also the other Mirage turtles. Where's the other one? Here's the other one right here. Bringing those other turtles right now. Yeah, a good bunch of brand new Mirage-inspired turtle comic characters. We've now actually been recently looking at quite a lot here on this channel. We've gone through Triceratops, Zog. We've looked at also Master Splinter. We, of course, have had a look at Eastman's version of the Mirage Turtles. And now with the clone shredders, it's a good time to be a turtle fan. I always say that usually when we look at turtle toys, but now it's also a good time to be a Mirage comic fan as NECA's been really knocking out of the park lately with their releases. 2 times the shredder, 2 times the fun, even though in this case you get 2 shredders, but really one of them is only about the size of his one leg. The smaller shredder is a fun accompanying piece to go with the much cooler of the 2 shredders, the one that has the 4 arms. Not only does he have 4 arms, that automatically makes him a lot cooler, but he also has himself these little space worm end attachments. One that you could put on the end of his arm stump, and the other one you can attach onto the severed forearm of his arm, which is definitely going to be the way I'm going to be displaying the figures. Not only does it look cool, but it brings in some necessary color, because of course you got the darker burgundy, you got the darker kind of beige browns. It is nice to bring in a little bit of purple in there, even if it's coming from the likes of space worms. The figures are fairly posable. I was actually kind of surprised to see that the smaller size shredder was posable as much as he was. He is limited, though, to be fair, in his arms. You can't really do much of anything when it comes to his biceps, his elbows, or his wrists, but he does have at least hingeability in the tops of his thighs, and you can move his feet back and forth. And even though looking at him, it may be a little intimidating, you think that you're never going to be able to get this guy to stand, and while failing with several attempts during this review to get this guy to stand, you can see that even rotating on a record player turntable like this, it's not really a record player, you can see at least that the figure stands perfectly fine. Still, though, to do one better, I would have liked to see that NECA included a display stand just to ensure the longevity of tiny little mini shredder not falling off the shelf and taking a large tumble. The tumble would be even taller considering how small he is. But what do you guys think of the Shredder clones? Pretty nice looking set. Have you had the chance to get the set for yourself, or are you planning to get this set? Let me know down below in the comments section. Once again, a big thank you to the folks over at NECA Toys that did provide this sample of the brand new NECA Toys TMNT Mirage Comics Clone Shredders. If you guys enjoyed this video, why not hit with a like if you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more. We are, by the way, still going to be looking at some turtle stuff. So if that's the kind of thing you like to come to this channel for, I'd like to think that you're going to be coming back to this channel for other things, not just going to the buffet table and picking out the chicken balls. You're going to be also getting some of the other stuff Variety. Variety is what I'd like to think I'm bringing to the table every single time you're coming to this channel. And while, yes, we are still going to be looking at turtle-related things, we are, of course, always going to be looking at other stuff as well. There's always a good, bountiful selection at this buffet table, so make sure you're coming back with a couple of extra plates. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.